You're live.
Привет, everyone. Thanks for coming to another episode of Sundays with Lenin. So each week we talk about the relevant issues and news items of the week, and then we read Lenin to see what Lenin had to say about the same exact thing from 100 years ago. The sad part is that you realize that nothing has fundamentally changed in about 120 years. The good part is that, Lenin has defeated that once. So this too can be defeated. And hopefully we won't. My dream one day that I keep having is that one day we're going to get this totally MAGA uncle. And then he's going to join us on Sundays with Lenin. And then he's going to come out to be like, I love Lenin. And that's my dream. Hello, Rebecca M. And so so this week we talked to Josephine Varghese, who is an Indian social work teacher in New Zealand. And she just finished her PhD. And we're going to talk about vaccine imperialism. So Lenin talked about imperialism being the highest stage of capitalism, and he's right. And we also talk about immigration, and Lenin actually predicted the entire way the US immigration system works 100 years ago. So it's and if you guys had read Lenin, we would never have had Trump, because we would not have been victimized by his fear-mongering about immigrants. We would have realized that it is because of capitalism, and where the immigrants come from is because of wages. And Lenin clearly explains that by using 100 years of data. And if we use 100 more years of data, it only confirms that Lenin was totally right. And yeah, so with that, we'll stick around at the end for questions, for some trolling about Ted Cruz maybe, and whether or not his dad was involved in the JFK assassination. Trump apparently thought so. So with that, thank you for joining us, and we will be here live to discuss all this at the end. And please let us know what we can do to make this seem more relevant to you, what we can do to help get more people in on this, because this is fun. That's all I can say. Today we have Josephine, who's from Kerala, India, but now she is a professor of social work at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand.
A lecturer, not a professor.
Same thing, professor.
Yeah, but I just completed my PhD last year, and I've just started teaching. I've been teaching for a while, but I finished my PhD last year, so I'm doing a little more teaching now. So I'm currently located in New Zealand, in the city of Christchurch, Ototahi, which is the Maori name of Christchurch. And I studied at the University of Canterbury here teaching over there as well. So I've lived here through the horrible terrorist attacks in the mosques over here. So you might have heard about Christchurch before. And yes, yeah. And so, yeah, Esha's right. I am from Kerala. And I moved here when I got, a place in the PhD program at UC. So that was about 5 years ago. And thank you so much for having me, Esha, on this show. And it's an honor to be here with you.
Well, thank you so much for coming. So for those of you who have not, check out Josephine was on Katie Halper's show about 2 or 3 Sundays ago, and she spoke a lot about vaccine imperialism. And that's what I wanted to have her back on because, well, we all know who wrote the thesis on imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. So this is a form of imperialism that we really want to talk about. So I guess I know you've mentioned this, but can you kind of explain how you got involved in the and also there have been some developments like Angela Merkel. So can you kind of talk about that too?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll begin, by talking about the sense of alienation that I felt, looking at the pictures of people struggling and dying on the streets without access to medical supplies and without access to vaccines.
Hold on. By access, they mean that there is literally no medical supplies anywhere in the country, not the same kind of access that Joe Biden lies about. But go on.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the media is full of images of people dying on the streets and really harrowing stories. And at the same time, I'm located in New Zealand, which is a settler colonial nation. And, the images of the media is full of those images. And then the media also talks about the charity work that New Zealand is doing. Yeah, no, but I think it would be similar in the USA as well, where you see the images and then the only other discussion about how we can address this is probably, talking about fundraisers or simply charity or giving charity to the CoVaccine program, which is a United Nations initiative, but it's kind of like working on a charity model. But, none of the narratives around this tragic, the tragedy that's unfolding in India covers the issue of the corporate profit making out of this human tragedy. So one of the main barriers that we face in India, in accessing, not just in India, but in the whole of the developing world. This is not just India, this is the entire Africa, Latin America, this is other South Asian nations, Bangladesh, Nepal is going through a crisis right now. Sri Lankans are also facing huge shortages. So we're talking about, a majority of the global population being denied that technology that already exists. So what I'm trying to say is the media discussions, they stop at presenting these harrowing images and also talking about how generous and charitable those, Western nations are. They don't talk about the systemic barriers that are in place that are actually making the situation so horrible, making us unable to address our own needs and thereby making us dependent on charity. So what I'm talking about here is the intellectual property laws, which were instituted in the, in the wake of neoliberalism by the WTO. And these intellectual property rules govern the trade of technology advancements, including the medical research and technology. So we have this formula available, we have this medical technology available, but the intellectual property, because of the intellectual property laws, they're only they're owned by a few big pharma companies, and the existing supplies are hoarded by the richest nations in the world. So we've got a multi-pronged crisis here. On the one hand, the global vaccine production facilities are unable to be, we're not using them fully because of the patent laws and because of the fact that only a few companies have the legal right to produce them on the one hand. The other hand, we have the existing supplies being hoarded by the rich countries. Many of the rich countries have more than twice the amount of vaccinations needed to vaccinate the entire population, and the third thing is the price. So because of the limited supplies and because of the monopolies of these few big pharma companies, the prices are also quite high and inaccessible for a lot of poorer nations who are currently many countries are completely dependent on charity, and not even less than 1% of their requirements are being met through this charity model. So this is the issue that I'm talking about. So as this second wave unfolded in India, I'm going through a sense of alienation, the stark reality of imperialism right in front of my face, affecting my people, my friends, my parents, and my compatriots, millions of people from India. And at the same time, we are seeing this double speak at a global level from the so-called beacons of democracy and liberalism and human rights, these Western nations who patronizingly talk down to us on how to be, to uphold human rights, and that they are blatantly violating the human rights of millions of people in the global South. And this is not the first time it's happening. It's happened in the past. And, more and more of us are becoming aware of it. But right now is the moment to actually pay attention because it's unfolding right in front of our eyes. And like you said, Esha, we're seeing a confluence of imperialism and global capitalism. And these go hand in hand right now. And, and as people are crying for help, we're still not treating this issue with urgency to remove the barriers and improve the supply of crucial medical technology.
Well, so these are the two things. Like you basically spoke for me. I don't know, like you just spoke everything I always feel all the time at every single moment in time with this like few minutes. So that's why I didn't want to interrupt you because it was what I was going to say. I want to say, but you did it better. But yes, that is the whole crux of the thing, is that the Western population is so alienated from all this that it doesn't even occur to them that this is going on. So they can't hear our cries for help because it's not even occurring to them. And they don't even Lenin kind of talks about this, about the way the Western press does it. But what happens is that the population is they're extra, I don't know what to say, but it's like America does so much propaganda because they can get away with it with their population because they made them extra complicit, maybe. So they'll never hear our cries for help at all. So what do we do, I guess?
This is, I think I also forgot to mention one thing. So I'll come to you, what you just said there, but I also forgot to mention that the reason why I am describing this as a double speak is because these very nations, the rich nations, they're actually supporting the big pharma at the WTO. So on the one hand, so they are, maybe I already mentioned it. I don't know. It was a big rant, but so on the one hand, they're supporting big pharma and intellectual properties and limiting our ability to produce these crucial technology. So what can we do to make our cries heard, isn't it?
I mean, our cries won't be heard. That's the thing. Like, we have to do something different, I guess.
Yes, Esha, but on the one hand, when you think about it, there's no dearth in the amount of material that is coming out, the images coming out from India, the global media is showing the images coming from India. They are hearing our cries, but what is their approach to the situation?
They have none.
Their approach is like, let's give a few $1 million, in donations or in charity. So their approach is to to address the issue are just falling short. And not only are they falling short, but they're also not able to, because the dominant narrative is just the capitalist narrative. People do not question, the principles upon which medical research and medical information and intellectual property is being currently traded, and the monopolization of this medical research. So I think the biggest barrier we are facing is the dominant discourse, which is basically a capitalist discourse, and we are unable to see that capitalism is one of the reasons. Capitalism is one of the reasons why this problem is existing. And instead, the only sort of traditional ways of addressing these crises are usually just charity. And that's the way people are thinking in the West. We just need to do some charity, but we don't look at the systemic issues, the problems that are embedded in our global governance.
Of course not. Actually, I'm sorry to do this right at this moment, but this week on Historically, we also talked about the other charity that's very problematic. That's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So check that episode out. But go on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. So the cries are being heard. The media is carrying our cries, but the ways to address these cries is not clear,
Okay. So hold on. So what exactly is wrong with the charities? And obviously, and what is it that charities can't do? Like, I guess, what are the limits of charitable power?
Okay, so let's. I would like to sort of approach this question by discussing, the narrative of global aid, and which is based on this charity model, right? Of the privileged nations who basically, achieved their privilege and their wealth through a system of colonial exploitation and imperialism. And this global aid model for development of the global South, and of course, charity and all that is part of it. So for me, the charity model, it is part and parcel of the of neocolonialism. And the reason I'm saying that is the charity model, it does many things. On the one hand, it creates an appearance of generosity and of having an intention to change the situation of many people who are deprived. And at the same time, it allows the status quo to continue because it doesn't address the root causes for poverty and deprivation and the, completely unscientific way of distribution of wealth and resources in the world. So the charity model is problematic at multiple levels. And just looking at the numbers, of this recently, there was a report. It was published in, I think The Guardian published it. And one of the key authors was Jason Hickel, the anthropologist. And it showed how many $1 trillion were taken away from the global South since after the post-independence sort of era. So this idea of charity itself, we need to question it. If you look at the value of the resources and the wealth and the labor that's being taken out of the global South and compare it with this, the charity amounts that are coming in the other direction, we're still living in a very colonial world. And so I will share that with you so that you can probably share it, with the viewers as well, that paper that discusses how many trillions of dollars. I don't know the exact, I can't remember.
Well, if we're talking about colonial England, they stole at least 200, I don't know, quite a few trillion from India.
That's true. Yeah. I can't remember if it was 408, something like that crazy number. Yeah. And Patnaik.
Sucking sound. Like, it's like.
So there's this Indian economist. Her name is Utsa Patnaik. She's a Marxist economist. And she has made the calculations of, the exact figure of what the UK has taken out of India. And so, the charity model, it's like a smoke screen. It allows the status quo to continue. And at the same time, it also allows the oppressors to look generous. So it's actually evil at two levels, because it doesn't address root causes. And it also allows this idea of, generosity of actually the people who are exploiting and oppressing our environment and our people.
Actually, this seems like a great transition to our first piece called Bourgeoisie, Philanthropists, and the Revolutionary Social Democrats.
The Bourgeois Philanthropists and Revolutionary Social Democracy by Lenin, and it was from 1915. The Economist, a journal that speaks for British millionaires, is pursuing a very instructive line in relation to the war. Representatives of advanced capital in the oldest and richest capitalist country are shedding tears. Is it okay?
Yeah, no, it's great. Lenin's making fun of them because they started the war. So he's like, now they're shedding tears about the war after they started the war.
Yeah.
He's being funny. Go ahead.
Yeah. The Economist, a journal that speaks for the British millionaires, is pursuing a very instructive line in relation to the war. Representatives of advanced capital in the oldest and richest capitalist country are shedding tears over the war and incessantly voicing a wish for peace. Those social democrats who, together with the opportunists and the Kautsky, think that a socialist program consists in the propaganda of peace will find proof of their error if they read The Economist.
Right, that was really funny because The Economist loves Pinochet and they haven't changed at all in a century. That's why I'm laughing. Go ahead.
Their program is not socialist, but bourgeois pacifist. Dreams of peace without propaganda of revolutionary action express only a horror of war, but have nothing in common with socialism.
That kind of sounds like our bourgeoisie propaganda that you were talking about with the vaccine porn, right?
Yeah, exactly the same. Yeah.
Okay.
So they express horror of war, but they don't have anything common with socialism. That's correct.
And they don't do any revolutionary action, so they're not doing crap.
Exactly. They don't systemically address it. They only want band-aid solutions like charity, which makes them appear good. But in effect, they're actually hurting us more than helping us. Now, moreover, The Economist stands for peace just because it is afraid of revolution.
True.
For instance, that's true. For instance, its issue for February 13, 1915 contains the following passage. Philanthropists profess to hope that the peace settlement will bring with it a great international reduction of armies. But those who know the forces which really control the diplomacy of Europe see no utopias. The outlook for this is for bloody revolutions and fierce wars between labor and capital, or between the masses and the governing classes of continental Europe. Yeah, it connects really well to the situation, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because the ruling class, which is so entangled with the bourgeois class, they're trying to avoid revolution. For me, the People's Vaccine Movement is a revolutionary movement, and
but it requires us to append like the past 100 years of capitalist legal frameworks, right?
Yeah, it does. It does, especially the more recent neoliberal ones too, which re-entrenched this last 100 years of capitalism. The WTO, for me, it's the WTO, the IMF, and the World Bank. These are institutions of recolonization, and this is something that I want to talk about, later in our podcast, the concept of recolonization. Okay. In the issue of March 27, 1915, we again find expression of a desire for peace that will guarantee freedom of nationalities, etc., as promised by Sir Edward Grey. If this hope is not realized, the paper says the war will end in revolutionary chaos, beginning no one can say where and ending in no one can say what. The British pacifist millionaires have a better understanding of present-day politics than opportunists, the followers of Kautsky and similar socialist whimperers after peace. The bourgeois know first that phrases about a democratic peace are an idle and foolish utopia, while the old forces really control the diplomacy that is until the class of capitalists has been expropriated. Secondly, the bourgeoisie has made a sober appraisal of the outlook, foreseeing bloody revolutions and revolutionary chaos. To the bourgeoisie, a socialist revolution always seems revolutionary chaos. In the realistic politics of capitalist countries, three kinds of peace sympathies can be seen. The first one, the more enlightened millionaires wish an early peace because they are afraid of revolutions. They have soberly and correctly described any democratic peace without annexing as utopian under capitalism. So any democratic peace is as utopian as capitalism?
No, he says any democratic peace, and he defines any democratic peace as without annexation and limited armament so that the armaments industry can still continue.
Yeah. Okay. This Philistine utopia is being advocated by the opportunists, the adherents of Kautsky and the like. Now, the second one of peace sympathies. So the first one, the second one is the unenlightened masses of the people, the petty bourgeois, semi-proletarians, part of the workers, etc. Those whose desire for peace is very vague, and thereby expressing a growing protest against the war and a growing but as yet vague revolutionary
This
sentiment.
is everyone in the West, in my opinion.
This is, that's so much, that's
Everyone.
basically what we're seeing right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the PMC are very much part of this.
Yep.
The professional middle class in the West and also in the global South,
Yeah.
The middle class in the global South are also basically they reproduce, the narratives of,
That's why they let them into Harvard so that they can get their degree and go back and reproduce the same systems.
And so interesting is, when the Queen's scholarships, the Queen of, the UK, they give some scholarships, and get the best minds out of India, and they take them, to the UK, and then they propagandize. And then they send them back. Anyway.
That's exactly what Lenin talks about too. But that's the way they keep control, is that they have this, that's why they have all, like, America lets all these like foreign students in so that they'll go back and be like, oh my God, the World Bank's so awesome because of this like weird reason that is not really real, but it's totally awesome. Like, that's why you have, oh my God, economists. I'm just going to say, economists from first world country, including the magazine, The Economist, should be all banned.
Just yesterday, one of my close friends, he used to be a close friend, but he's from Bangladesh, and we met at a conference in Denmark, and he shared a post on Facebook where he got this letter of acceptance from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Oh God.
Eugenics. Okay.
And then, and how happy and pleased he was, and how lucky he feels. Materially, it really improves it's an access to, a lot of material comforts and security, and also social capital, right? Social capital. And so I understand how people, think of it positive. This is exactly what's happening, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Obama Foundation.
Okay. Jenna, can you, I'm going to put this here, but can you play the clip of Bobby Malhotra talking about
how all these Indians died of, I forgot which disease, but polio after Bill Gates' polio vaccine and he got kicked out. I'm going to give you that clip right here to play. Okay.
Can we quickly talk about the polio paralysis in India?
Yeah, that was a pretty big case. To make the story short, there is a study at the NCBI government side that he couldn't buy away, and the study is named Correlation between non-polio acute flaccid paralysis rates with pulse polio frequency in India. And this study shows that around 500,000 people were affected by his polio experiments there, and those experiments were highly illegal. So poor people, poor women were lured into getting a non-tested, at that time, experimental vaccine for polio, but they were told it's something like a shot for a beauty shot, for example. And also Bollywood stars were given money to lure the poorer population into these experiments. So what was the outcome of the experiments? We have 500,000 injured girls, babies, and women who either died or have paralysis. And these experiments were highly illegal. And afterwards, there was a special Indian parliamentary investigation into the whole thing. And basically, the Gates Foundation was afterwards thrown out of India after the case. And
wow.
The people in India are very, actually the poorer ones are very aware of the wrongdoings of the Gates Foundation. But the problem is he was able to return to India due to the corona crisis.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
Okay, so now the third kind of peace sympathy that can be seen is the revolutionary social democrats, the enlightened advance guard of the proletariat, are attentively studying the sentiments of the masses, utilizing the latter's growing striving for peace, not in order to bolster the vulgar utopias of a democratic peace under capitalism, not in order to encourage hopes being placed in the philanthropists, the authorities, and the bourgeoisie, but to bring clarity into vague revolutionary sentiments, to enlighten the masses with 1,000 facts of pre-war politics, basing that work on the experience of the masses and on their sentiments. They are out to prove systemically, steadfastly, and unswervingly the need for mass revolutionary action against the bourgeoisie and the governments of their respective countries as the only road towards democracy and socialism. Right. So that was
okay. So I know I should have told this before, but everyone, okay. So let me just give you guys a quick background. We can move this before or after, but basically every social democratic party in 1913 decided that they were not going to vote. They were like, if they were in power, they were not going to vote for World War I because there was a war of imperialist conquest where they were dividing the pie amongst themselves. Karl Kautsky went back on his word and voted for the war credits in Germany, and Lenin hates him ever since then, rightfully. But then, like, you'll notice that Lenin hyper focuses on him and obsessively writes like everything about Kautsky. So I just wanted people to know, like, he I bet you, like, if somebody does a statistical analysis, 50% of all of Lenin's works is about how Kautsky is bad.
I see.
Okay, I just wanted because so there's I have two potential pieces, but let's discuss this one. So I see that, yes, everyone talks about how there's a lot of vaccine porn is what I call it. But like I said, there's no, like, they actually systematically prevent anything. If somebody were to actually suggest a real solution, such as like, let's get rid of the WTO, or we need to waive the rules, or like whatever, they're going to be censored from mainstream media. So the idea is that if there's any actual solutions, they're going to be censored to keep the kind of population stupid, I guess, or whatever. But so since the last time we spoke, Biden allegedly has, what is it? And then, but Merkel stepped in. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a few things over there. Okay. So firstly, I don't think I mentioned what the People's Vaccine Movement is, did I? Should I just mention
It's up to
that?
you. Yeah, or we can do. Yeah, I thought we did it last week, but it's okay. Go ahead. Let's mention it again.
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, that's good. Yeah. So what Biden did it was 2 weeks ago, he announced that he will no longer block the TRIPS waiver that was proposed by developing nations, and supported by over 60 developing nations of the WTO, and proposed by India and South Africa. And so up until that point, USA was the most prominent nation among the group of rich nations that was blocking it. So they were not only not supporting us to address this crisis, they were actually impeding it by blocking this effort. And on that day, two weeks ago, he said that he will stop blocking it and he will support a patent waiver in spirit, basically. And so for me, what has happened, and it's so interesting that, the kind government of Jacinda Ardern, who refused to support the patent the WTO TRIPS waiver of up until the point when Biden shifted his position. That's the point when this kind government of Jacinda Ardern, budged a little bit. And both of these governments, both Biden and Jacinda, they didn't really come to our side of the debate. They've only budged and moved to the center, which is so typical of, the politicians like Biden and politicians like Jacinda Ardern. They're not really interested in creating change or anything. They just want the image or the veneer of kindness and compassion and of change itself, right? So what Biden has done, in my view, it's actually, from his perspective, it's a strategic masterstroke, because he has simply moved to the center. He hasn't come to the side. So he's still continuing. He's not supporting us. He hasn't supported our cause yet, but he still gets credit for coming, shifting his position. And most people who are not completely, engrossed in this debate will simply think, oh, now USA supports it, so, we can move on to other discussions. So what countries like USA and New Zealand has done is actually they have dampened the activist movement to waive the TRIPS laws by creating a sense that they have changed and they have started supporting it, when actually they haven't fully supported the TRIPS waiver, which is put forward by the developing countries at WTO.
Okay, well, this is a very common tactic. I mean, even AOC does this, where a lot of the Western politicians, for most of the, I guess, for the big part of their voting population, it doesn't make a difference that they actually follow through. Like a few years ago, AOC put out a tweet where she's saying that she wanted to ban lobbyists from joining, from congressional rep. And then Ted Cruz said, "Oh, I'll work with you." But then neither have actually put a bill forward, even though it's been 4 years maybe now, or 3 years. And it's the same kind of thing where Biden just says crap. And there is no, I mean, even within local American politics, remember a few months ago, Biden said you'll get $2,000 in the mail if you vote for, and then he went back and said $1,400 or $1,600. And even to their local population, they don't even feel a pressure to follow through. So of course they won't even feel pressure to follow through with a foreign population, but they can get away with it because of these outrageous lies. And it always pisses me off, but I don't know what to do because there's nothing to be done. But that's the thing, is that this is enough of a propaganda where they can continue to demonize China, who is actually giving, and Russia, who is actually giving vaccines in the eyes of Americans. And this is all literally Biden needs to do. And there's no consequences.
Yeah, there's no consequences. And the effect has been counterproductive because a lot of activists have gone silent.
Yes, that's exactly the point of it. It's enough to shut up these activists because they are not trained to, like, they haven't even, it's like it works. It just doing a publicity op works for these activists because they don't follow through and they'll go silent. And that's exactly fit its purpose. And again, America still continues to amp up the Cold War with China and Russia. And we see this BS things about, I forgot what, there was some new stupid article about China and vaccines. I forgot which one, but there's a new one, I'm sure. And it's all about that because for them, there's no pressure from the West here to actually, not even for themselves. Like they're not even afraid of the American people themselves to make sure they give $2,000 when America can just print money, right? So what hope is there for the global South or the third world countries? Nothing.
Yeah, and I want to also assert that leaders like Justin Trudeau and Jacinda Ardern are very much part and parcel of this group of imperialists. They're actually
one of the worst ones.
Yeah, they do it more effectively. So, with the veneer of kindness. And for example, after the Christchurch mosque attacks, this was in my city. I've walked, to go to my university, I have to basically go very close past the mosque. And, it was a harrowing incident that happened over here. And of course, the response to it was globally renowned how, Jacinda Ardern had a sort of a compassionate approach, going and meeting with the people, wearing the scarf over her head and saying things like, this is not who we are, they are us, and those sorts of things. And but there's this article written by a refugee who grew up in New Zealand, who says this rhetoric that's saying that they are us, this is not who we are. This is a form of institutional gaslighting because it doesn't show the racism and the Islamophobia that New Zealand has had over decades, centuries. Right?
If not centuries.
And instead of taking that moment as a point to reflect on the kind of, the culture and the kind of, colonial narratives, Islamophobia that is so, prevalent in a country like New Zealand, she said, this is not who we are. They're not, they're us, thereby just, sort of saying that, this has got nothing to do with us. This is not our problem, something like that. And the article, which I can share with you, also talks about how in the same year that the Christchurch mosque attacks happened, New Zealand budget earmarked $25 million to stop refugees from arriving on boats in New Zealand. So there's a big, sort of a contradiction between what is being the rhetoric and actual policy, right?
Yes. And it's like, it is as it's always that way because they can't. It's not very popular to say, we're going to kill 1 billion people in Africa. Like that's not at all a popular thing. So they always have to obfuscate and lie and confuse their thing. But the population there is just the right amount of people who are so comfortable with their existence that they don't even see to question the boundaries.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. Yeah. And it's, Jacinda Ardern is more than, she's a very capable technocrat. So she's got huge support. But, the fact that this person who forefronted compassionate politics of kindness in her campaign and throughout her political career, especially as a prime minister, her refusing to support the people's vaccine movement and then only budging when Biden changed his position and still not being an activist or if she has such global reach, she could be an advocate for this if she were actually kind and if she actually saw immigrants from the global South as part of New Zealand society. She would see our pain. She would see our pain, of being here.
I don't think so. No, she's meant to not see your pain, though.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm saying. So she's effective. These sorts of politicians who appear, very savvy, sophisticated, very articulate, and knows the right words to say, they are the more effective imperialists than the likes of Trump, who would garner a lot of opposition. People like Jacinda Ardern are more skillful at maintaining the neoliberal and imperialist global order.
Oh, absolutely. Because she makes a good, she makes it so that, the thing is that American people, like, she makes even the people in New Zealand comforted to know that, I guess, they're not America, or they're not, like, but she's still not doing anything useful, right?
Yeah. That's true. And even on the domestic level, her approaches to major issues like New Zealand has the worst housing crisis in the whole of OECD, a huge homelessness crisis. And, Maori are disproportionately represented in homelessness, housing insecurity, in the prisons. Maori are only 15% of the population, but they form over 50% of the prison population. Maori women are the highest incarcerated indigenous group anywhere in the world. And so her approaches to this are very, very much just incrementalist, pandering a little bit with the status quo, increasing the benefits a little bit, but she will never. She ran, for example, in 2020, we had an election, and her election, she didn't really lay out a substantive manifesto. She simply wrote the COVID success. But one of the things that she made very clear in her very vague sort of campaign was that, we have a Green Party. The Green Party said, we need to impose a wealth tax. And Jacinda Ardern's response was, not under my watch. We will.
Oh my God, why?
Yeah. So this is who she is. The rest of the world won't see it. And the rest of the world would look at, for example, the increase in the minimum wage. This was a big news in the rest of the world where,
but
the
they had to strike for 2 years or something, right?
The strikes, but also New Zealand has a tradition of increasing the minimum wage a little bit, every couple of years. And this is done by not just the Labour Party, but also by when I came here, it was the National Party, which is
is that the same as the Liberal Party? No, whatever, right? It's
similar to the Liberal Party in Australia. So we have a National Party that's equivalent to the Liberal Party and in Australia, and then we have a Labour Party, which is similar to the Labour Party in Australia. I mean, yeah. Where they stand, not exactly similar, but yeah. So the National Party also used to increase the minimum wage. But what Jacinda Ardern did is the minimum wage was like $18.50 or something, $18.50. And she raised it to 20 because the 20 number sounds huge. And so it was celebrated by, even leftists in the USA. Like I saw Kyle Kulinski talking about it. I saw, different leftist commentators talking about it as a leftist victory, but it's not really that big a change. She doesn't really address the systemic issues, the huge inequality in New Zealand. And I also want to say New Zealand, the inequality is crazy. We have the bottom 50% of New Zealand, the poorer 50%. They own only 2% of the total wealth in New Zealand. So the inequality is huge here, and she doesn't address that. She doesn't question the power of the people who have concentrated wealth in this country.
And where exactly is the New Zealand's military? What kind of military adventures are they doing? Are they with them? Of course, there's the Five Eyes Alliance, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No one's questioning those boundaries either.
Yeah, well, I mean, the military-wise, I don't know if New Zealand is a big,
I'm sure they're not. Imperialism-wise, they're kind of there. And they've never opposed. They'll never oppose anything the U.S.-UK cabal does, right?
Exactly. So they haven't, for example, recognized Palestinian statehood. They've sent troops to Iraq and Afghanistan. So they're very much part and parcel of the global imperialist sort of alliance. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess what I noticed, I mean, generally it's, they're a little bit, it seems like she's not even that much better to the domestic population, but it seems like that's the main difference between the other imperialist nations versus the USA is the fact that
we have some things like universal healthcare. Yeah, some things like that.
So maybe that might be like pulled away at any moment in time, but still there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it is there, but it has been, like you said, it has been increasingly being, cut back through after the introduction of neoliberalism. And, I think New Zealand has had some interesting policies in the past. Universal pension. I think New Zealand was the first to institute it in the world. We
should actually eventually, maybe it could come back, but research like how it happened, because a lot of Americans think it just kind of happens magically, but it's probably like a lots of strikes and blood and shootings and tears and brown shirts.
Yeah. I'll probably have to come back to.
But yeah, for that, I was just like saying that out loud because I hate it when Americans kind of don't realize, like they're like, oh, Denmark, and I'm like, yeah, Denmark, like Sweden, at least I know, had like 4 million, like they had the largest number of brown shirts, as in like people to like just shoot down everyone who striked. So it's like, they spilled a lot of blood there to like get whatever they had. It didn't just magically happen, and Americans don't realize that.
Yeah, but it's also like, if you look at it, if you look at what happened after the Second World War, especially, there was the across the world, the leftist movement, the socialist movements, even the communist movements were gaining strength. And these sorts of social democratic solutions were a way, like just what we read, were a way to pacify the masses so that they don't revolt against.
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly what they were. And then what happened is that with the acceleration of capitalism, they don't even feel that pressure anymore. Nothing really, there's nothing to oppose them. And especially locally, and everything just falls apart. And unfortunately, I just don't see the American population actually getting anywhere close to being even slightly active, I guess.
Yeah, but I remember reading about the post-war housing sort of project, which was undertaken by United States. And then the director of it saying that, in order to keep the masses in the USA silent and make sure that they don't, align themselves with the Soviet, we must give them things like a house, access to appliances, washing machines, make them,
more comfortable.
Yeah. So this is the way in which this is a Cold War strategy in a way, to pacify the masses so that they don't revolt against the bourgeoisie. Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit. I mean, but they don't feel that pressure that much anymore. It's like it's like the USA slides off first, but New Zealand's next. It's not like New Zealand's not gonna everything's gonna slide soon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think at the moment, as it is, I think there's a lot of resentment. There's a lot of poverty and unemployment and inequality and housing shortage and so I think it's not easy for governments in places like New Zealand to actually go full on with neoliberalism like they did before. So yeah, it's an interesting place we are in now, where there is so much critique of the neoliberal project that happened in New Zealand. It happened in the 80s and so I think leaders like Jacinda Ardern, although they are neoliberal, they can't sort of, go ahead with it like they did in the past anymore. So that's Yeah, although, there are indications of a little bit of austerity model being used here and there. They've frozen the salaries of public employees, government employees for 2 years, stating that.
But didn't she do something really bizarre with like the COVID relief where like businesses, can you talk about that?
Yeah. So the COVID relief, I don't know. I think it was way better than the US response. But basically what happened is the government took over the private payrolls and just funded them. And the condition was that you need to maintain the workers. You can't lay them off. But then the companies, they took the money and they laid off their employees anyway. And so they walked away with millions of dollars. And so there's no accountability on that front. And nobody talks about that. But at the same time, the government was really not willing to improve the benefit, the levels of benefits that the poorer people receive, for example. So that all these are very neoliberal in nature. Basically just maintaining the status quo, rather than thinking of solutions like a massive state housing program or, real solutions, increasing the amount of public assets, nationalization of services. So currently neoliberalism is encroaching into the medical sector, for example. Private insurances are coming into play in New Zealand. It's becoming more and more desirable to have a private insurance.
That's how they government they always start. It's kind of like a drug. They go, and then they go. They always start off with like a little bit at a time. They won't eat it all up at once.
Yeah. So they've been underfunding the health sector for a long time, and the concept of universal healthcare is sort of like partial. It's not really there, because if you want to see a doctor, you got to pay like $60 to go and see a doctor. So only the care in the hospital is free. So how you reach there, there's barriers in reaching there.
So it's actually worse than Australia. I had no idea.
Yeah, so you got to pay like 60 or $75 in some places. Some places it's 50. So a lot of poor people just don't go to see the doctor because they can't afford it. And then their health gets worse, and then they have to be taken into the emergency room. And
but I guess at least they're okay. This seems like a little like a USA light.
Yeah. So no, they're so. And neoliberalism is encroaching in the medical field, and the government's reforms. So recently there have been some reforms in the government because the medical system was not really working properly, but the reforms that they brought were very for me, it was very structural reform. So they abolished regional district health boards, and they're bringing it to the center, like, NHS in the UK. But actually, they're not addressing the actual barriers in accessing healthcare, like, doctors' fees, dental is not covered, hearing and eyesight.
I did not realize New Zealand was backwards. Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, so they're not addressing all those issues, but they're doing some restructuring and making it look like they're doing stuff. But actually, they need to reconceptualize what they mean by public health. And
they don't. Obviously, they won't. But I guess the people need to understand that their limitation, and it's like they obviously won't because they benefit. Like they're made not to see it. So it's like. The people, I guess, somehow need to figure it out, but they won't either, but whatever.
It's also like the waiting list is so high. Like my partner had to have a small thing, and then we applied for it through the public system in February, and they said, in October, maybe we will have you on the list.
It's crazy.
You are on the waiting list. So people who have money,
they've understaffed it on top of underfunding it.
Yeah, underfunded, understaffed, under capacity. So we need more capacity, more staff, more funding. But, by underfunding it, the private market is just encroaching. So the rich people are able to access these private clinics, just so expensive. Like that particular service that we were seeking, it would cost like over $1,000 if you go to the private one. So it's just beyond poor people's capacity. So the only way poor people can access this healthcare in many cases is to get so bad that they're taken into the emergency room, and then they can access healthcare. So it's really, really, so for example, the disparity in the life expectancy of Maori and, the dominant European population is like 7-8 years. So on an average, so there's a big disparity in life expectancy as well between those who are disproportionately poor and those who are better off. And so these are some of the issues that are there in New Zealand, which probably a lot of people don't know. And also recently, the immigration policies of New Zealand are so regressive. They, for example, in the first government, we are sort of going in a tangent here. We're talking about New Zealand politics.
No, it's fine.
So this is the second term of Jacinda Ardern. In the first term, one of the immigration ministers just said, culturally arranged marriages won't be recognized. So if you're
bloody fucking okay, I'm sorry, but
so you can't bring your partner over if it was an arranged, if you haven't lived together.
Okay, this is like, okay, how are they going to enforce it? Like, how do you know it's arranged? And that's like so, oh my God. No, but it's like so racist because
let me show you a media item that I found. It's there now. Yeah.
I don't see it yet. I see it now. Okay. Let me look at this. Okay. It says Trump wants only rich. Yes. What? Okay. The low skill is such BS because with imperialism, what happens is that because they are higher up on the food chain, they have manufacturing and then they extract raw materials so that the low skill are low educated. That was deliberately created in third world countries in order for the imperialists to extract more resources. But that's another story. But the Western is about that. But oh my God. Oh, okay. So she actually calls it a different, more obscure name so that you don't she uses a more technical term than Trump. Trump's like, we're going to ban poor people. And then she's like, we need to have some sort of fewer reliance on temporary labor migrants.
They only wants rich immigrants. So now if you want to apply for a permanent residency here, you need to be earning like more than 100K in a year, and there's a lot of crazy new things. So it's basically, unless you are loaded, you can't become a resident over here. You can't renew your visas.
That's crazy.
But it's very classist and it's very racist. And so I got this Twitter, this tweet that I tweeted as well about it, which might be interesting.
Okay, let me read that. Oh, actually, Lenin also talked. Okay, hold on one second. I will figure that out. Okay.
Yeah, let's read.
Hold on, no. Let's change the piece. There's a better one on this one. Okay. For many racists, okay, that actually I got a better piece for Lenin. Give me 1 second. Google thinks I'm a robot because I've been like searching too much. Okay. Capitalism and workers' immigration is probably the best one to read, where Lenin explains.
Let's read it.
This one, the one I'm going to send to you, that is what we should read, because that explains how capitalism forces workers to like move to the imperial core. And Lenin has stats too. So,
Capitalism and workers' immigration. This is from 1913.
Yeah, za pravdu means of the truth. I also know this case because we just learned it in Russian class. But
this sounds really nice. The truth, is it?
Yeah, pravda is actually very. I'll explain that later. But go on. I'm going to go on and tangent, so let's not do that. Okay.
Capitalism has given rise to a special form of migration of nations. The rapidly developing industrial countries, introducing machinery on a large scale and ousting the backward countries from the world market, raise wages at home above the average rate and thus attract workers from backward countries. Hundreds of thousands of workers thus wander hundreds of thousands of versts.
Verst is some unit of measure of Tsarist Russia. And let me figure out what a verst is. A verst I don't know what a verst. A verst is a unit of measurement that is somehow equivalent to.
It's the length measurement, is it?
Yeah, it's a length measurement. It's like 500 sazen, which makes a verst equal to 1,066 meters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's about a kilometer, maybe.
Yeah, but it's I understand.
So he's saying thousands of kilometers. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Thousands of miles, thousands of kilometers, or thousands of versts.
Yeah.
Now, advanced capitalism drags them forcibly into its orbit, tears them out of the backwoods in which they live, makes them participants in the world historical movement, and brings them face to face with the powerful, united international class of factory owners. This is really interesting, and it's so relevant even to New Zealand. And this, for me, it illuminates New Zealand's relationship with the Pacific Islands, the poor and developing Pacific Islands like Samoa, like Fiji, like Tuvalu, Vanuatu, these sorts of countries. New Zealand has a colonial relationship with them, and the best evidence for that is the kind of visas that are available for them. So these are seasonal visas. So they bring the workers over to work in the farms over here, like the kiwi fruit farms and the apple farms and the avocado farms and all that. So they bring them over to work in the farms, give them extremely low pay. They basically live, sort of, the living quarters are really substandard that no person in New Zealand would live in, like in dorms,
Oh, wow.
And really like horrible working hours, oftentimes 12 hours, working from the morning on. And then these people that come on these visas, they only can stay here for the season, and they can't extend their stay. So the visa, the racism and the colonialism is embedded in the visa policy. And this is a very good indication of New Zealand's colonial relationship with the Pacific Islands in the region.
Well, also that policy is there because they want to that actually stops them from unionizing and asking for better rates. Because then the minute they like in America, there was this one company, I can't remember the name of it, but it's an evil. They basically just like the minute these migrant workers ask for like you formed a union, they like called ICE on ICE with the. ICE is what do you call it?
ICE on them, yeah. ICE on them.
No. Yeah. What do you call it? Immigration, customs enforcement, or something like that. I forgot. Whatever.
Yeah.
But basically, they just like called the police on them and deported them because. And so it's like, so basically, it's the reason. Well, I mean, it's not that they can't hire New Zealand workers, but they don't want to pay as much as they want to have New Zealand workers, but they also want to not have them unionized, and that's why they have these like immigration laws that they can just like. I just
want to mention this. So during the pandemic and the lockdown, these New Zealand farmers are very wealthy, and they make millions in profits.
Are they like corporate farmers or are they people farmers?
What do you mean?
Like, is it like, okay, in America, we don't have people farming anymore. Everything's a corporation. So when you say New Zealand, is it still people?
Yeah, no. Oh, yeah, no. So these are huge land ownings.
Okay. So it's still people now. Okay, got it.
It's people, but there are some corporations involved, like Fonterra and stuff like that. New Zealand's main stuff is dairy and beef and sheep stuff, But but what I was going to say is during the pandemic, there was a lockdown and the, flow of seasonal workers stopped. And then the farmers, these owners of the farms became crazy. Oh my God, we don't have workers. We need the borders open so that we can get these workers to exploit. And then, the government couldn't do that at the time. And the government was like, okay, we're going to open the borders just for that. But then they also said, why is it that New Zealanders don't want to work in this? And
it's like they don't pay enough.
Yeah, exactly. It was complete. And they were like blaming people on the benefits. They're like, why can't you come and work on our farm?
Oh my God, that's exactly what Biden's doing right now. So what he's like trying to do is like, he's trying to like, okay, so the restaurants like pay really crappy amount. And so they basically, they don't know people. I mean, I'm not going to go, like, they should not go because it's not even a living wage. But then Biden is literally doing that where they're like, what did he say? I forgot something horrific last week. Janet, do you remember?
They said that if you are offered a job, basically you had to take it pretty much no matter what, because you're going to be kicked from getting any benefits if you don't take that job.
Wow. That's just like this. Yeah, is that what he said exactly? Yeah, that's what's his word. And yeah. So yeah, it's literally it's that. And so there it seems like so it's a universal capitalist thing, but yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah, and it's like, and I was saying during the time, like, why doesn't Jacinda Ardern say, hey, why don't you put up your wages?
Not Lenin.
And she wouldn't do that. She was like, oh, we'll negotiate how to get these seasonal workers in somehow. But she doesn't say, hey, if you want to be so-called patriotic, and you're saying that you're creating jobs, create good jobs that people can live on and good conditions. But she never did that, right? She was encouraging beneficiaries to go and work on the farms. This completely disregards the situation of beneficiaries who might have their families and children in the city. You can't just, give it up and go and live on a farm the next morning. It doesn't make any sense,
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so hundreds of thousands of workers thus wander hundreds of thousands of worsts. Advanced capitalism drags them forcibly into its orbit, tears them out of the backwoods in which they live, makes them participants in the world historical movement, and brings them face to face with the powerful, united international class of factory workers. There can be no doubt that dire
factory
poverty
owners
alone.
Hold on. He says factory owners, not workers. Mm-hmm. Lenin said factory owners, just making sure.
Oh, so sorry. Yeah.
United
international class of factory owners. It's not factory workers because we haven't.
They're not powerful.
Yeah. We haven't united yet. Yeah. So, yeah.
And they're not powerful because they're factory workers.
True. Yeah. And they're very, fractured. And anyway. There can be no doubt that dire poverty alone compels people to abandon their native land, and that the capitalists exploit the immigrant workers in the most shameless manner. But only reactionaries can shut their eyes to the progressive significance of this modern migration of nations. Emancipation from the yoke of capital is impossible without the further development of capitalism and without the class struggle.
Hold on. Let me just mention why he says that. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, So when you don't have large scale industrial production, people literally have to like sit in front of a spinning wheel and spin, or people literally have to have a plow and go plow. Mm-hmm. So you actually need industry, as in a big tractor to just like run through the field, or like the spinning machine. Yeah. So he's saying that people like you can divide the pie equally, but in order for everyone to be happy and comfortable, you need to have labor saving. And that's why he said it. Go for it. No. Okay.
Yeah, but only reactionaries can shut their eyes to the progressive significance of this modern migration of nations. Emancipation from the yoke of capital is impossible without the further development of capitalism and without the class struggle that is based on it. And it is into this struggle that capitalism is drawing the masses of working people of the whole world, breaking down the musty, fusty habits of local life, breaking down the national barriers and prejudices, uniting workers from all countries in huge factories and mines in America, Germany, and so forth. America heads the list of countries which imports workers. The following are the immigration figures for America.
And we have a chart. So Janet will put up the chart, so you don't have to read it. But
so this is from the 19th century and early 20th century. Yes. Okay. So the growth of immigration is enormous and continues to increase. During the 5 years, 1905 to 09, the average number of immigrants entering America, the United States alone is referred to, was over 1 million a year. It is interesting to note the change in the place of origin of those immigrating to America. Up to 1880, the so-called old immigration prevailed, that is, immigration from the old civilized countries, such as Great Britain, Germany, and partly from Sweden. Even up to 1890, Great Britain and Germany provided more than half of total immigrants. From 1880 onwards, there was an incredibly rapid increase in what is called the new immigration from Eastern and Southern Europe, from Austria, from Italy, and from Russia. The number of people emigrating from these three countries to the United States was as follows. And
it's kind of funny because after the Eastern Europe and after Southern Eastern Europe and Austria and Italy kind of got better economies, now there was another new immigration of people from Asia and India. So it's like they keep going to more and more poorer countries as time goes on. So it's kind of like the same trend exists, but after after Lenin died, like in 19 something, they changed it to Asia, and then it became India, and soon it will become. You know what happens.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. And and this is not some. I think it's true in the case of immigration, but it's also true in the case of how capital flows. So
that's exactly what Lenin writes about in Imperialism, and this is just one observation from that.
Yeah, and so as workers' rights improve in different countries, they will move. When it's a bit better in India, they will move to, other parts where they don't have as many labor regulations.
Exactly. In fact, that was what the purpose of the TPP was.
Yeah. So thus, the most backward countries in the old world, those that more than any other retain survivals of feudalism in every branch of social life, are, as it were, undergoing compulsory training in civilization.
He means American. Go ahead.
Yeah. American capitalism is staring millions of workers of backward Eastern Europe, in quotes, including Russia, which in 1891 to 1900 provided 594,000 immigrants. Oh, wow. There's a lot of immigration happening at the end of the 19th century.
Yeah.
And in 1900 to 1909, 1 million. Oh, wow. 1,410,000 of their semi-feudal conditions, out of their semi-feudal conditions, and is putting them in the ranks of the advanced international army of the proletariat. Which the author of an extremely illuminating book, Immigration and Labor, which appeared in English last year, makes some interesting observations. The number of people emigrating to America grew particularly after the 1905 revolution. 1905.
Oh, okay, here, I'll put those numbers in on the chart so that we don't have to read it.
Mm-hmm. Workers who had participated in various strikes in Russia introduced into America the bolder and more aggressive spirit of the mass strike. That's amazing. It's
really funny because right after the Russian Revolution, all these workers got deported from America for teaching American workers how to strike. No, seriously, go ahead.
Yeah, but it's interesting what, when human exchange happens across borders, the ideas that come with it are so interesting. Yeah, so great. Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely has benefited workers in America, and the effects of those sorts of thinking that was brought from Russia by Russian workers has lasting effects in USA, I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
no, kind of, because everything was erased after. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. I was just speculating there. Anyway, let's go on. Russia is lagging farther and farther behind, losing some of her best workers to foreign countries. Yeah, this is talking about the brain drain. This is the other thing that, is interesting, which many anti-colonial scholars and leaders also talked about, the brain drain. So the best workers to foreign countries, losing the best workers to foreign countries. America is advancing more and more rapidly, taking the most vigorous and able-bodied sections of the working population of the whole world. Germany, which is more or less keeping pace with the United States, is changing from a country which released workers into one that attracts them from foreign countries. The number of immigrants from Germany to America in the 10 years, 1881 to 90, was 1,453,000. Wow. But this is crazy. Wow. Okay, so
but in the 9 years,
I didn't know that there's so much, movement of people in.
Yeah, no, but look how it dropped. Like as soon as Germany got it dropped almost down to zero.
Yeah, but in the 9 years, 1901 to 09, it dropped to 310,000. Wow. Yeah, so that's a big drop. Yeah. So the number of foreign workers in Germany, however, was 695,000 in 1910-11 and 729,000 in 1911-12. Dividing these immigrants according to occupation and country of origin, we get the following. And there's another chart.
Yep, I'll put that up.
The more backward the country, the larger the number of unskilled agricultural labor it supplies. It's just like we were saying before. The advanced nations seize, as it were, the best paid occupations for themselves and leave the semi-barbarian countries the worst paid occupation.
That's exactly what you said with seasonal workers in New Zealand, and that's more or less what they do in America too.
Yeah, and it's continuing to this day. Yeah. So Europe in general, in brackets, other countries, provided Germany with 157,000 workers, of whom more than 8/10 were industrial workers. Backward Austria provided only 6/10, of the industrial workers. The most backward country of all, Russia, provided only 1/10 of industrial workers.
I mean, that's exactly the same thing that happened in the US. Like what you see is now it's not Mexico, because Mexico's doing really pretty decently now. So now we're getting the migrant farm workers from Guatemala or Honduras. But before, there used to be a lot of farm workers from Mexico, and we don't get them anymore. So it's the same exact phenomenon. Where So it's like a predatory nature in which, like, the idea is that not to increase wages, but to go to a country that's more exploitable once, like, you can't exploit Mexican workers anymore, right?
Yeah.
Is that happening in New Zealand too? Probably, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think this is the same thing that's happening in relation to the Pacific Islands, right? Yeah. As some Pacific Islands are doing better, they will move to the more poorer ones.
Exactly.
So the seasonal visa still remains, but the people who come often shift anyway. Yeah. Thus, Russia is punished everywhere and everything for her backwardness. But compared with the rest of the population, it is the workers of Russia who are more than any others bursting out of the state of backwardness and barbarism, more than any others combating these delightful features of their native land, and more closely than any others uniting with the workers of all countries into a single international force of emancipation. When was this written? It was before it was before the revolution. That's
because after the revolution, like most workers just stopped going. Like, in fact, there's some. I'll show you later.
So interesting. Okay, so the bourgeoisie incites the workers of one nation against those of another in the endeavor to keep them disunited. That's so true. Yeah, absolutely. Like how. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Class conscious workers, realizing that the breakdown of all national barriers by capitalism is inevitable and progressive, are trying to help to enlighten and organize their fellow workers from the backward countries. So
Yeah, he's encouraging
talking about
people
solidarity between
Yeah.
workers from different parts of the world, because the capitalists try to divide them and show each other as the enemy of each other rather than
Exactly. Like here, that's why, like, even though we know that this, like, immigration for like at least 100 years, if not more, we've known that that basically capitalism inevitably like forces workers out of their home country because it ruins them. Lenin talks about it in the development of capitalism, so you can kind of see that basically it ruins the one population through like mass flooding of the goods, and then they're forced to migrate from here because you just ruin their industry. So it's like there's a whole cycle, but most people can't see the same cycle over and over.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. And because this is from 1913, and I want to like sort of segue into a little bit of talking about the communist movement in Kerala.
Okay.
And shall we do that?
Of course.
Do you think?
Sure. It's up to you.
Yeah, because we're talking about the early 20th century, and this was the beginnings of the revolutionary movements in Kerala. We had anti-caste movements, and later, in the 30s, we saw the beginnings of the communist movement in Kerala, and it's really interesting because if you look at India, the states that actually were able to do land redistribution, which was one of the socialist reforms proposed by many states, including Kerala, those states are actually doing much better than the rest of Indian states. Okay, so I think Kerala has had links with the global communist movement.
Well, obviously, there's actually like I can't find it right now, but there is definitely a letter that Lenin wrote to the Kerala Communist Party. Like but I can't find it off the top of my head right now because he's written like there's like 40 volumes. So I'll find it for you next week, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in the 30s, 40s, 50s, we're seeing, of course, the anti-colonial movement, many anti-colonial leaders and activists in India, seeing that the problem is not just the British, it's also capitalism, right? So anti-colonial
the British bring capitalism because the country of India is more or less managed by the East India Company. It's like not really a country.
Yeah.
So Lenin does this in like imperial. Actually, you know what would be fun? Maybe how about we can like. I know. Would you? Okay, like in about like a month or so, I think they might be ready to have imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Like, would you like that would be actually let's plan this out so that maybe
let's do it.
Yeah, and that way we can talk about Kerala, its communist movement, and I feel like weird now because I was mostly thinking about the vaccine.
Yeah, okay,
and I didn't prepare. I know he's definitely. I know there's one he's written to like the Kerala Communist Party himself. But there's like 40 volumes of his work. So, would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, I'm so happy to do that. Yeah.
Okay, now how do people find you? You're on Twitter and any other social media?
No, mostly just Twitter for my politics. Yeah, just Twitter would be good.
And you only we need to get you way more followers than you have.
And so, do you want to continue talking about the people's vaccine, or are we?
Sure, of course. What would you?
Why wind down?
Okay, hold on. Let me just make sure. Can I just like consult my notes and get like 1 minute break?
Yeah. Go ahead.
We talked about Biden's alleged waiver, and then we have not talked about why. What we have not talked about is like why it's still not implemented, even with like the alleged waiver. So that's where we left off.
Yeah.
So can you explain what happened there?
Yeah. Okay. So Biden's alleged waiver, support for the patent waiver. So he said that he supports the patent waiver, but the patent waiver is just one part of the larger plea that has been introduced by the global South countries of the WTO. What they are, the plea that the global South countries have put forward in the WTO covers not just patents, but a lot of other associated intellectual property rules, which we do require if we really need to be able to produce generic versions of vaccines, and also associated technologies as well, like other medicines that are necessary for COVID treatment, and also supplies like oxygen supplies and ICU sort of supplies. All these things are also governed by the TRIPS laws. And so Biden hasn't supported the full sort of plea that was put forward led by India and South Africa and supported by over 60 developing countries of the WTO. So we're at that embargo where the USA and New Zealand and some countries have even come to the middle, but these rich countries are not coming to the other side and fully supporting the TRIPS waiver that is put forward by developing countries. And the other thing is also EU and Angela Merkel, her spokesperson said that they're still standing firm with patent laws, and the sort of justification they're providing is that patents and intellectual property laws are fundamental to medical research and innovation, and so we can't do away with them. Although some of these rich nations have come to the center, many of them are still blocking it, and I think we don't have the necessary amount of support to pass the TRIPS waiver yet. So that's where we are, and we have also created the sense that there's some progress when actually there isn't. By Biden's announcement has created a sense that there's some progress.
So basically you kind of need every country that
I think it's 75% of the nations to fully back it. So that has been,
okay. So basically oh my God, that's like made it so that it'll never ever be waived.
Yeah. And for me, it also raises some, I think more and more people should be talking about this movement, the People's Vaccine Movement. And also many of the activists and many of the organizations that are in this movement, their conceptualization of the movement can be different to mine, because many of the people are suggesting a temporary waiver of the TRIPS laws. And in my view, the people's vaccine should be more robust and should be talking about reconceptualizing these laws altogether, and maybe, considering banning them when these laws are actually in the way and they're causing thousands of deaths. So, and we have an experience in the past with the AIDS pandemic where, experts estimate that 12 million people in Africa died without access to antiretroviral treatment because of the patents and because of the high costs, because of the monopolization of big pharma of these antiretroviral treatments. So we've had this horrific experience in the past, and instead of coming together and seeing how harmful it is, these patent laws actually got even stronger since 2015, even even with this horrible, tragic experience behind us, some people call it a genocide, what happened with the AIDS epidemic in Africa. And still, disregarding this, the corporate lobbyists are able to exert more power and more influence in the WTO rather than the democratic interests of the people. So for me, this moment, it's not simply, asking for a temporary waiver. Please give us a temporary waiver until the end of the. No, we need to question the very ethics and philosophy of medical research itself. Because if you look at a lot of the ethics and the stated ethics and philosophical basis of medical research, it's some of the foundational principles are reducing human suffering, prolonging human life, and improving the human
Okay. So, Josephine, quick. Can we just step back 1 second? Okay. So you say that. Can you explain to people who are not very familiar? You talked about the way we see medical research. Like, what is going on that impedes the vaccine? I guess has what we call vaccine imperialism.
Yeah. So currently, the way it is not just medical, but any sort of advancement in knowledge research. These are governed by intellectual property, copyright laws, patent laws, all these sorts of things. And even though they are, produced often by public funding, taxpayer money, they become the property of certain private.
So, okay. So they are produced with public money and then speedily privatized.
Yes. Yeah. Because what happens is a lot of the governments end up funding the private labs. And so the private labs become the owners, or the private companies who own the labs become the owners of the intellectual property. And they are not willing to share it because the owners of the company are making billions. So, I think it was like a few weeks ago, it was Moderna or Pfizer, one of them, releasing a press release that they gave $22 billion to their shareholders for their.
Wow.
Vaccine.
Oh my God. So, wait. So after the vaccine was publicly supported, they did not even. Okay. So the reason, half the reason why pharmaceutical companies claim that they need to hike up the price is because we have to invest so much initial money and not everything we invest turns out like whatever. So we have to adjust for the risk, and that's their nonsense. But what we're seeing is that their initial reason is not actually happening, and they're just only getting medicines that don't have any risk and that already are the only thing they need to do is produce and sell, right?
Yeah. And this, if you look at the justification given by countries like Germany and New Zealand, for their refusal to support the people's vaccine, it's this capitalist myth.
Well, did you remember what Angela Merkel said? I just want to type that back so that we kind of understand this.
Oh, yeah. She said that this waiver, this is not the way to address the the lack of supply. We need to look at other avenues. Patents and intellectual property rights are the hallmark of innovation.
Oh my God, that's such a lie. It is a hallmark of how you fill out the paperwork.
Yeah, it's a lie on multiple levels. Okay, number one, it's not the scientists, the teams of scientists who produce these vaccines. They're not the ones who get the profit out of the patents. It's the shareholders of the companies.
Because it's who owns the patent, not who makes the patent.
Yeah. So most of the scientists working, these are huge teams of hundreds of scientists working on this project. They're on fixed salaries, right? They're not getting they might get a bonus or something, but they're not getting these billions of dollars as the shareholders. So this idea that the patenting is what is at the center of innovation is wrong, right? And also, if you look at the free and open software movement. I don't know if you've noticed that one. So there's even in the software and computer science, intellectual properties and copyright is a big debate. And we have on the one hand people like Microsoft, who basically monopolized software.
Oh yeah. Hold on. I'm so glad. Just we're gonna put in just one more clip of Bobby Malhotra talking about Bill Gates and his antitrust suit. It's kind of funny because we had it like this week. The other podcast had Bobby Malhotra talk about the entire Bill Gates. So and you just brought it up. So it's like it's a good segue. Sorry, the U.S. Department of Justice filed an antitrust lawsuit. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that led to him creating his nonprofit?
Yeah, so in 1998, Bill Gates' business strategies, they came somehow under fire. And the United States Department of Justice sued Microsoft for antitrust violation. What does this mean? This antitrust violation was set up or established to outlaw monopolies, cartels, and also any company which could stop any innovation in a certain industry strain. I hope you understand what I mean. So they filed an antitrust, and there was an 18-month trial with Bill Gates, and his image was pretty much going down the dumps because it was coming out more and more how Microsoft really operates, and as I said before, pretty ruthless. And after the Antitrust Act, Microsoft kind of agreed with the Justice Department to set the whole thing aside, and the first judge rule was overthrown again, and they kind of settled the whole court case with a lot of money. But the image of Bill Gates was really damaged, and he kind of officially stopped being in the leading position of Microsoft, and he invested, I think, around $100 million to found the Gates Foundation in particular.
I'll send it to you, Janet. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so within the computer science field, if you look at software development and all those sorts of algorithm developments in the area of computer science, there's one sort of group or one school that thinks that copywriting and those sorts of monopolizing intellectual property is really important, and Bill Gates is one of them, a very good example of it. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, there's this free and open software movement, which is like, no, we need to share information so that, technological advances available to everyone and the best brains can come together collectively without, being associated to any particular company and develop this. And within free and open software movement, a lot of people who are interested in coding, they do it in their free time. And sometimes the developments they do are completely anonymous, but they just do it for the sake of it, because they're interested in it. And so this idea that patents and the sort of profits are the only way that...
Well, they're not actually a way for innovation, because like any property, right? A patent right is a right to exclude. Like it's like a big fence you put around.
Exactly.
So it's like every other part, like every property right is the right to exclude. So you know how in America they try to make private property seem like freedom? But it's not. It's like the opposite of freedom.
Yeah. And the more you share, that's when you get more brains and more people thinking about it and more development happening. So actually patents are not only not good for innovation, they're actually harmful for innovation. So we need to deconstruct these capitalist myths about what it is that drives innovation.
Exactly. Well, unfortunately, I agree with you on this every single moment. I mean, if we really so can't rely on the press for that, because they're extra not meant to question it. But yeah, it's like once you deconstruct it, it's so obvious, but it's like you have to do the same thing 110,000 times for people to get the picture, right?
Yeah. So, and so this is exactly what Bill Gates is doing. So Bill Gates made a fortune basically out of copyrights. Because of copyright, he was able to amass so much wealth.
Yes. And his mother. Don't forget that his mother gave him. His mother was working in the board of directors as the CEO of IBM, and she knew him, and she got him his first deal. So nepotism.
Oh yeah, of course. Your circumstances always are very important in this. But he's basically using the same philosophy and sort of impeding the efforts for a people's vaccine, for mass production of generic vaccines and medical supplies. And he gave an interview to a British channel, I think it was Sky News, and this became very controversial. Yeah. And did you...
No, which year? Which year?
Just now, right now.
Okay, go ahead. What did he say?
During the pandemic. And he was saying, giving away this information is not enough. Developing countries, they don't have the technical know-how, and they're unsafe. He was just creating all this. He knows that it's wrong because 60% of the global vaccinations are currently being produced in factories.
And why does he hire all these workers from developing countries to work at Microsoft if we didn't have the skills?
There's a person from Sri Lanka who's broken down the arguments that Bill Gates makes, and basically completely destroyed them. So I'll give you.
Aibon, Vanakkam, Salam. I'm Indy, and this is Indy.ca, and today I'm going to talk about why Bill Gates is pissing me off. So there's kind of a Venn diagram of pro-vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, and in the middle, everybody hates Bill Gates. So the reason I hate Bill Gates is this statement. Just listen to it.
Allowing these vaccines, as you say, the recipe for these vaccines to be shared would be helpful. And do you think that would be helpful?
No.
Why not?
So here Bill Gates is saying no to sharing vaccines during a pandemic. This is like saying no to water during a fire. It's patently insane and cruel and greedy. And you only have to understand it in terms of who Bill Gates is. Now, Bill Gates is someone whose company was prosecuted for monopolistic behavior. So we put a monopolist, he's dabbling with his monopoly money in public health. And of course, this has led to disaster because company monopolies have no place in public health. Public health is about human beings. And what Bill Gates is talking about here is defending the rights of corporations and profits. And of course, people like him to then launder their profits into their own fucking reputations. And it's leading to disastrous results. But I want to go into the logic of what Bill Gates is saying here. So his argument is that we can't have all these people making vaccines because it'll be unsafe. So I won't paraphrase. Let's just go into his own words.
There's only so many vaccine factories in the world, and people are very serious about the safety of vaccines.
So let's break this down in two parts. First, he's saying there's only so many vaccine factories in the world. The implication here is that the vaccine factories are in the West, and so we can't just go randomly setting up factories in backwards-ass places like India. This is a lie, and I think Gates must know that it's a lie. Over 60% of the world's vaccines are currently produced in India. The Serum Institute is the largest vaccine manufacturer in the world. So India is actually able to manufacture vaccines. It's actually a fucking crazy lie that the West calls itself the industrialized world. Most of the factories are here. Now, what Bill Gates is doing here is actually playing on the ignorance of his audience. He would know that vaccine factories are actually primarily developed in the developing world. But he's playing on the fact that most people in, say, the Sky News audience would still think of India as backwards and, not technologically advanced. So he's playing on that idea, and he's exploiting racism for profit, essentially. And it's sickening. So
I don't know where to begin with the Bill Gates Foundation, but but the scary thing is that's not the only one. There are thousands of others that monopolize medicines and their production, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a systemic issue. We're not talking about one individual, we were talking about the system. And of course, it's crazy how influential a person like Bill Gates is in global public health policy.
Even though he knows nothing about it.
Exactly. Why is he one of the determining or influential voices in global health?
Because he has money. It's you might as well listen to somebody who's a relative. it's exactly that. He has money, and that's why he can buy himself an audience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. Yeah. And what was I going to say? And one of the things that really frustrates me is related to the concept of, is what I was going to call recolonization. It's like when I talk about the people's vaccine to people in India, for example, the middle class, educated, urban Indians, I often see them repeating the narratives, the capitalist narratives about patents.
Yeah, Lenin, actually, it's kind of funny. Last week we spoke about exactly this, where Lenin mentions how the petty bourgeoisie often, without thinking, like with Jeffrey, not with Jeff Epstein, but not that Epstein. His name is unfortunately Jeff Epstein. But that was the quote that he pointed out, is that so many petty bourgeoisie, just because they're so comfortable, they don't have to navigate the walls, that they'll just mindlessly repeat it.
Yeah, yes, true. But it's also related to the dominant. It's not just petty bourgeoisie. It's often a lot of other people as well. It's just the information that is available, right? What is the media saying?
I know. But the reason why they fall for it is because basically it's the concept of hegemony, in that you can only lie to people if their reality doesn't conflict with it. Like if they are in a bubble, you can lie to them a lot. But if their reality conflicts with it, like if you're a poor, like I don't know, like a coolie worker in India, there's only you can get away with lying to them much less, because their reality, like the reality they face, hits them in the face. So the reason why the petty bourgeoisie in India can be fooled by Western media is because they are comfortable enough that reality doesn't hit them in the face, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah. And this is what I would call recolonization. And the reason why I'm saying this is, if you look at India during the independence struggle, we were, a lot of the anti-independence movements and the major leaders, many of them were also anti-capitalist. Not all of them, but many of them. And also there was a culture of critiquing imperialism and its connection to capitalism.
Okay. So this is kind of funny, because India became a victim of its own success in the same way. Well, notice how this, like, too many people got into the middle class, and then they got access, but unlike the Chinese government, the Indian government has not. Like India had what do you call? There is no Indian local propaganda. There is nothing that stops them from just buying into the global hegemony, and unfortunately, that'll keep happening unless there's an actual socialist government with we totally needed. Mao.
So what I'm trying to say is. So what's happened is, during the time of colonization, I think there was, and right after that, there was way more critical discourse within the Indian landscape. But then we get, what is called the liberalization, privatization, globalization, which happened in the early 1990s, which is basically the introduction of neoliberalism to India. When India's economy was really reeling and struggling, India had to go to the IMF to get some money, and the IMF said, yes, we will give you,
but privatize, yes,
up your economy and allow foreign capitalist interests to come to India. And since that point onwards, this has become the dominant narrative. And also, like you said, it's true. A lot of people became, improved their life after the liberalization, privatization, globalization.
No. They improved their life before then, and then they got the people who had already had access to education later.
Yeah, it's people who already had privilege who actually
that's what I was trying to say.
Benefited from it.
But anyways, thank you so much, and we will literally actually in 2 weeks. I will prepare for because imperialism, because that's and the letters to Kerala, so we can actually talk about this with that. That way, I'm prepared.
That would be amazing. Yeah, that would be amazing.
Okay, cool. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
You're not on camera.
because now.
Yes. All right, now you're
Hello,
live.
everyone. We're back now live. I hope you enjoyed the. Am I here now? Hello, everyone. We're back now live. I hope you enjoyed the earlier stream with Josephine Varghese. She's Doc Jojo on Twitter, so please follow her. Today we had some really awesome questions, so let's just get to it. By the way, right after this stream ends, we're gonna do a bonus stream for you guys, and I'm gonna punch you in the face if you don't join the bonus stream. But this stream will end, and you'll have to come to the bonus stream in 5 minutes. And I better see the same number of people, or else I'm gonna come to your house and start punching you guys in the face for not coming to my bonus stream. But we will explain why Emma Vigilan's really cringe video about why it wasn't a socialist movement in the US was super wrong. I mean, like, it's not like Lenin didn't, you see, like, Lenin literally wrote, these are all the essays Lenin wrote about America, which just takes over 700 pages. So she could have, like, actually checked real statistics and data instead of, like, making up what she believed is true, which happens unbelievably often amongst Americans. I just want to, like, it's frustrating. But the reason why Americans can do that is because that's a sign of privilege. Like, if you are up on the food chain, people beneath you are not going to be like, yo, dog, you're wrong. They'll be like, I understand, blah, blah, blah. And so that's kind of just baked into the culture, unfortunately. But today we had some excellent questions. So can we put up the first question on air? The first question we had was from Mr. Piece of Work. He said, I had a little row with my sister. She is a blind consumer and she cannot see how much she wastes or how much damage her lifestyle causes. She's all about the false notion that hard work will lift you up into the sky. And that fortunately or unfortunately, well, fortunately you don't need Lenin for this. You can actually listen to Bane's speech from Batman The Dark Knight Returns, and he's like, they have fed you the myths of opportunity, and what is it, Gotham shall serve. Let me see if I can do my Bane voice. Let's see, Bane Gotham speech. Let's see what is it? We take Gotham from the corrupt, rich. Let's see, how does it go? We take Gotham from the rich, corrupt, and the oppressors who have kept you down with the myths of opportunity. We shall give it back to you, the people. Gotham is yours. None shall interfere. Do as you please, but start by storming Blackgate and freeing the oppressed. Step forward those who would serve, for an army will be raised. The powerful will be ripped from their decadent lairs and cast out into the cold world that we all know and endure. Courts will be convened. Spoils will be enjoyed. Blood shall be shed. The police will survive as they learn to serve true justice. And this great city, Gotham, it will endure. Okay. How's my Bane impression? Is it good or bad? Because this way we don't get any copyright issues by showing somebody asked me, Neil saying, can you do a historical about how Batman is ruling class propaganda? Sure, but Bane is really cool. He's not a villain. Bane is the hero. It doesn't help because I have a super huge crush on Christian Bale, so it's kind of hard for me to like not talk every 5 minutes about how sexy Christian Bale is if we do a Batman thing. But if you don't mind me literally talking about it every 5 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, he's so sexy. we can totally do a Batman episode and talk about how Batman is ruling class propaganda.
You have the second question.
So the second question was from Snoopy Shaboopy. Why would you expect them to read them when they've been propagandized against them for decades? Okay, so she said, like, Americans have been propagandized against communists for decades. And what I'm going to say is yes. But the reason why so even George Orwell understands the limit of propaganda. He once said that Hitler can say that the Jews started the war, and if he wins, that will become the truth. But he cannot make 2 + 2 = 5, because for ballistic purposes, he needs it to equal 4, at least. So that is the thing about propaganda, is that it only works until it comes crashing in somebody's face against their material reality. So basically, you can't do the same propaganda, because it'll just, let's say that your reality says, let's say that you are a slave in somewhere, I don't know, Tibet. And somebody says, like, capitalism is awesome, this is cool, and then, like, you're a slave, you're like, no, and you're just not going to believe that. But in America, because it was higher up on the food chain, what happened is that, so remember, like, the amount of wage that the way America gotten wealthy, like domestic stealing, this much, imperial looting, that much. And so the higher up you are to the center of the imperial core, the more they can simulate reality to be similar to what they say. So so that's why they could even do the propaganda, because they kind of had to have a bunch of soldiers who would fire without asking questions or orders. And in order to do that, you have to construct a reality that works for them. So in fact, on TikTok, I explained, this one lady asked, my son's a white male and I'm afraid he's going to turn into a right winger. How do I stop that? And I said, the reason why he turns into a right winger is because he subscribes to what Marxists know as idealism, which is a bourgeoisie justification about why the hierarchy is justified, why the status quo is cool. And it doesn't work on all American white males either, because for about 80% of them, material reality just goes boom and hits them in the face, and that won't work. But it will work on enough that every time there is a group that tries to coordinate and organize, they'll have these loyal soldiers that will go bing, 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 bing. And unfortunately, so what it is that if reality has not already depropagandized them, their class interests exist in not being depropagandized, and they won't be. So I don't know what else to say, but yeah. And so the reason why, like, and then when you look at the propaganda, it's like so stupid. I'm not proving that Stalin is good. I'm proving that Stalin cannot make it rain with his mind. He cannot teleport from Moscow to Vladivostok. I'm not proving that Kim Jong-un is good. I'm just proving that he does not have a necromancy machine and he can't reanimate the dead. So their propaganda can't stand up to even just a little bit of interrogation. All you have to do is, like, remember, just kind of go back in history, compare before and after. But the reason why there is no interrogation is that there are enough people who are comfortable. And then there's also a stigma. So for example, people like Emma can make videos being totally wrong and she'll feel absolutely no stigma. But the reason why they didn't use me to do the video when I will be totally right is because I actually fight against a dominant hierarchy, and there is stigma to use me on the video that they don't want to deal with. So that's why so that's a second way they meant the state manufactures consent and coercion. The coercion is the fact that it's a much bigger headache for them to deal with people who are right, who go against what the state wants you to go against, and so I'll never get hurt. But if so that way there are many people who individually like make these connections and kind of aren't propagandized, but they are afraid to come out in public and come out of the closet because of all the stigma that is created by capitalism. So it's not that it's like if you can see with both eyes open, everything is so clear, and it's just that a lot of people just don't care. Schmoopy, so no, I'm not saying there's less of a barrier than you think. I'm saying that if Schmoopy Shaboopy asked me, so you're saying that there's less of a barrier than I think. I'm saying no. I'm not saying that there's less of a barrier than you think. I'm saying that for some people, the barrier is so large, like it's like the Great Wall of China. So if their class so there are two groups of people, and these two groups will it's like the parting of the Red Sea, except they won't come back together again. So if reality hasn't hit them in the face, they're just not worth the time for you. You might as well find the 10 people for whom reality has hit them in the face, is what I'm saying. Does that make sense? Because the only reason they can believe the propaganda is if reality hasn't like hit them in the face with, like, if they haven't run into the wall with reality. And so find people who have already run into the wall and are face down, face planted. Yeah. Oh, I mean the barrier. Oh, there's absolutely no barrier to coming up to the working class. Shmoopy Shaboopy said, I mean the barrier of anti-communist. Actually, there is absolutely none. I know this because I was canvassing in South Carolina. I think I told a story of how and these are just like, I don't have data because I can't run a polling agency with data on it. But what you don't realize is that even the white working class, they're like way smarter than all these idiots who on the top. They know a lot. Like, for example, in New York Times, they have really stupid articles about America has always stood for freedom and democracy. Show this to some poor white guy in rural South America, a poor white boomer in rural South Carolina. He will laugh as hard as you are, like we laugh. So yeah, don't assume based on what all these, like, there's most idiots who have a voice in media are not of the working class, the poor whites. They're usually the petty bourgeoisie whites, and they make a lot of assumptions based on their own internal racism and stereotype. But what you'll realize is that it's not true. Like, you can actually, like, usually sometimes there's a blank slate. Sometimes there's like a little bit, but the working class are so smart that literally like one sentence is enough to like get them to be depropagandized. Literally, like, so yeah, a lot of people don't realize how smart the white working class in America is, and all the stereotypes of like the dumb white guy, those are all the petty bourgeoisie. Like, even all working class people are like the sharpest people, because if you're working class, you have to observe what's going on because you have to manage your boss's emotions, etc. And so they become very good and very observant. And so just like you'll see. And unfortunately, we can never get data on this because I don't have a polling agency. Are there any other questions? If not, please join the next stream in exactly 5 minutes, where we will debunk Emma Vigeland and her really bad ahistorical, non-researched Okay, so, sorry, one more thing. Okay, Schmoopy Shaboopy said, I'm not worried about the working class. I'm thinking of the middle class. Yeah. The problem is that, well, what we have to realize is that the middle class will be, as capitalism grows wilder and wilder, as we get to what Alexander Buzgalin calls Jurassic capitalism, there will be a smaller and smaller middle class. The middle class will bifurcate to the bourgeoisie class and then the poor class. So so right now there may seem like there's a lot of middle class people, but they will. So what will happen is that basically capitalism basically will cannibalize them into two classes, regardless of what profession they have. Even like, so a working class person is somebody who has nothing but their labor to sell. So you can be a doctor and have nothing but your labor to sell, and that will happen in the future if not, it has not already. And it won't happen through it'll just happen because they'll have student loans, and even if they get like 500,000, they'll only have $20 at the end of the month or whatever. Like, you'll see, they'll have nothing but their labor to sell. It'll look different, but like it won't look like Tsarist Russia or even America from 100 years ago. But it's the entire process is called proletarianization. And so yeah, so just remember that the middle class will shrink and shrink and shrink and become invisible. And so and reality will hit them in the face. So if it doesn't hit them in the face now, it will hit them 10 years from now. So I hope I have answered all the questions. And yes, come back in exactly 5. Correct. Schmoopy Shaboopy said, so the bootlicking won't be, well, exactly. They won't, they'll get smaller. And I mean, it already is smaller than it was like in the 1970s, because in the 1970s, being a factory worker, it made them middle class. And yeah, oh yeah, you can never speak to MSNBC liberals. They just need, yeah, you just don't. Just ignore them, pretend they don't exist. Mock them if you need to, but just, yeah, they're unreachable. Anyways, come back in exactly 5 minutes and I'll explain why Emma Vigilant, whatever her name is wrong, and why she shouldn't do videos without researching, and why this is cringe. And yeah, and so yes, the factory organized people, now they're more atomized, but unfortunately we don't know how they're more atomized right now because I don't have the data. So we need more of you guys to like look through the hardcore data and figure out and do like network diagrams and stuff of how they're atomized, so that we can figure out what to do, because we don't really know the problem and I don't have time to do all that data analysis. So you guys need to help me with that. And if they are your dad, it's your responsibility. I'm sorry. If they're your uncle, they're your responsibility. That's all I'm gonna say. Anyways, come back in exactly 5 minutes. Don't go anywhere. We will end the stream now.